He was a billionaire's son with everything money could buy. She was a struggling nurse working night shifts to survive. Two people who should never have met, until desperation forced them into the most dangerous lie of their lives.
I need someone to pretend to be my wife, just for a few days. I'll pay you $20,000.
If I'm going to lie to a dying man, it needs to be worth it.
It was supposed to be simple, a business transaction to give his father peace before he died, but as they played the perfect couple, something real began to grow between them.
What I feel for you, I'm not pretending anymore.
When this ends, I'm the one who has to go back to my real life. This is all just a fantasy.
But when family secrets exploded and a fortune hung in the balance, their fake marriage became a real battlefield. Will a man who's never trusted anyone fight for the woman who made him believe in love? And will Talia risk everything for a man whose world could destroy her? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today. Jared Caldwell adjusted his designer sunglasses as he stepped out of his sleek black sports car. At 31, he had everything money could buy: a penthouse in New York, vacation homes in 3 countries, and enough cash to never work another day in his life. The Caldwell Resort empire had made sure of that, even if he barely spoke to his father these days. His phone rang for the 3rd time that morning. It was his Aunt Margaret again. With an irritated sigh, he finally answered. "What is it, Aunt Maggie? I'm busy." "It's your father, Jared." Her voice trembled. "He's had a stroke. The doctors, they don't think he has much time." Jared's hand tightened around the phone. "How bad?" "You need to come home. Now." 48 hours later, Jared walked through the sliding doors of Savannah Memorial Hospital, his expensive leather shoes clicking against the polished floor. He hadn't been back to Georgia in nearly 5 years, not since that Christmas dinner that ended with broken dishes and words that couldn't be taken back. At the nurse's station, a woman with graying hair looked up. "May I help you?" "I'm here to see William Caldwell." Her expression softened with recognition. "You must be Jared. Your father's been asking for you." The hallway to his father's room felt endless. Jared loosened his tie, suddenly finding it hard to breathe. He paused outside the door, steeling himself before pushing it open. William Caldwell looked nothing like the towering figure who had ruled the family business with an iron fist. Tubes and wires connected him to beeping machines. His once powerful frame seemed shrunken against the white hospital sheets. "Dad," Jared said, his voice catching. William's eyes fluttered open. A weak smile formed on his pale lips. "You came." "Of course I came." Jared moved to the bedside, awkwardly taking a seat in the plastic chair. "Aunt Maggie said you're not doing well." William's laugh turned into a painful cough, always straight to the point, just like your mother. The mention of his mother made Jared's jaw tighten. She had left when he was 12, unable to handle William's obsession with the business. "The doctors say I won't be checking out of here," William said, his voice raspy. "Except in a box." "Don't talk like that." "Why not? It's the truth." William reached for Jared's hand, his grip surprisingly strong. "I've been thinking about you, about my regrets." Jared shifted uncomfortably. "Dad, you don't have to." "I do," William insisted. "I pushed your mother away. Then I pushed you away too, all for what? Hotels and golf courses that strangers use?" Jared didn't know what to say. This vulnerable version of his father was completely foreign to him. William's eyes filled with tears. "I'm going to die alone, son, just like I lived, and I'm terrified you're headed down the same path." "I'm fine, Dad." "Are you?" "All those women in the tabloids, all those parties." William's grip tightened. "Tell me you finally settled down. Tell me I can go knowing you won't die alone like me." The desperation in his father's eyes caught Jared off guard. In that moment, he couldn't bear to disappoint this dying man. Not again. "I'm married now," Jared blurted out. William's face transformed, years seeming to melt away as joy replaced pain. "You are? Why didn't you tell me? Why isn't she here?" Panic rose in Jared's chest. "She's busy with work, but she's flying in tomorrow." "What's her name? What's she like?" William was more animated than he had been in years. "Her name is—" Jared's mind raced. "I want it to be a surprise. You'll meet her tomorrow." As Jared left the hospital, cold reality washed over him. What had he done? He had less than 24 hours to find a wife. In the hospital parking lot, he paced back and forth, making frantic phone calls. His model friends wanted too much money. His socialite acquaintances were all out of the country. By nightfall, Jared was desperate. He returned to the hospital late that evening, hoping to tell his father the truth. But when he arrived, the night shift had started, and a nurse he didn't recognize was checking his father's vitals. She was beautiful in an understated way. Warm brown skin, curly hair pulled back in a simple bun, eyes that seemed both kind and cautious. Something about her seemed vaguely familiar. "Excuse me," Jared said. "I need to speak with my father." The nurse turned and recognition flashed in her eyes. "Mr. Caldwell, your father is sleeping. The medication makes him drowsy at night." Jared studied her face. "Do I know you?" "Probably not," she said, adjusting the IV bag. "But I know who you are. Everyone in Savannah knows the Caldwells." As she moved past him, Jared suddenly remembered. "Wait, your mother used to work for us, at the guest house." She paused, her expression guarded. "Yes, I'm Talia Monroe. You used to read books under the big oak tree." A hint of surprise crossed her face. "You remember that?" "I do now." The memory was clear. A skinny girl with braids, always with her nose in a book while her mother cleaned. Talia's professional smile returned. "Well, it's been a long time. Your father should be awake in the morning if you want to come back then." "I have a problem," Jared said, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. "I told my father I'm married." Talia raised an eyebrow. "And you're not?" "No." He was talking about dying alone, and he looked so sad. Jared ran a hand through his hair. "I panicked." "That's unfortunate," Talia said, turning back to her chart. "But I don't see how that's my problem. I need someone to pretend to be my wife, just for a few days." Talia laughed, the sound both genuine and incredulous. "You can't be serious." "I'll pay you," Jared said. $10,000, cash." The offer hung in the air between them. Talia's laughter faded, and something shifted in her eyes, a calculation, a consideration. "Why me? You must know dozens of women who would jump at the chance." "I tried them. They're either unavailable or want too much." Jared stepped closer. "Please." "He doesn't have much time." Talia looked at William's sleeping form, then back at Jared. 20,000. 15. 20, she repeated firmly. "My brother's tuition is due, and we're behind on rent. If I'm going to lie to a dying man, I need it to be worth it." Jared studied her. This wasn't the shy girl from his childhood memories. "Deal, but we need to get our story straight." Talia checked her watch. "My shift ends in an hour. We can talk then." In the hospital cafeteria, over coffee that tasted like cardboard, Jared and Talia created their love story. "We met in New York," Jared suggested, "at a charity event." Talia shook her head. "Too cliché, and I've never been to New York. He doesn't know that, but if he asks me about it, I won't have authentic answers." Talia stirred her coffee. "We should stick close to the truth. Say we reconnected when you came to a hospital fundraiser last year." "I've never been to a hospital fundraiser." "He doesn't know that," Talia echoed with a small smile. By midnight, they had crafted a plausible history. They'd been married for 6 months in a small ceremony. No, Talia didn't want a big diamond. She preferred the simple band Jared would buy first thing in the morning. Yes, they lived in his New York apartment, but Talia still worked as a nurse because she believed in independence. "What about your actual job here?" Jared asked. "You can't be my pretend wife and work night shifts." "I can request day shifts for a week," Talia said. "I'll say it's a family emergency." Jared reached into his wallet and counted out several $100 bills. "Here's a deposit. Get yourself something nice to wear tomorrow. Something a Caldwell wife would wear." Talia's eyes hardened as she took the money. "I know how to dress, Jared. I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did." She stood up, gathering her purse. "I'll meet you here tomorrow at 10 a.m. Don't be late." As she walked away, Jared wondered if he'd made a terrible mistake. But what choice did he have? The next morning, Jared paced the hospital lobby, checking his watch every few minutes. When Talia finally appeared through the revolving doors, he barely recognized her. Gone was the practical nurse in scrubs. In her place stood a woman in an elegant blue dress that hugged her curves without being flashy. Her hair fell in soft waves around her shoulders, and subtle makeup enhanced her natural beauty. She looked wealthy but not ostentatious, exactly like the kind of woman he might actually marry. "You look," Jared struggled for words. "Acceptable," Talia suggested, a challenge in her voice. "Beautiful," he corrected. He held out a small velvet box. "Your ring." Talia opened it and blinked at the simple platinum band with a modest diamond. "It's lovely. I thought about getting something bigger, but this is perfect." She slipped it on, the metal catching the light. "Ready to introduce me to my father-in-law?" Jared offered his arm, and she took it, her touch light but steady. "Remember, we're madly in love." "How could I forget?" Talia's smile was professional, practiced. "You're the man of my dreams." William was sitting up when they entered, color in his cheeks for the first time in days. His eyes lit up when he saw Talia. "Dad," Jared said, his voice unnaturally bright, "I'd like you to meet my wife, Talia." William extended a trembling hand, which Talia took between both of hers. "It's so wonderful to finally meet you, Mr. Caldwell." "William, please," he insisted, his eyes never leaving her face. "Or Dad, if you'd prefer." "William for now," Talia said with a warm smile. "We can work up to Dad." The old man laughed, then looked at Jared with something like pride. "You never told me she was so beautiful." "There's a lot I haven't told you," Jared said, the truth of those words hitting harder than expected. "Well, you're here now," William said. "Both of you. That's what matters." Talia took a seat beside the bed, still holding William's hand. "Jared tells me you're quite the storyteller. I'd love to hear about when he was young." As William launched into tales of Jared's childhood, many of which Jared himself had forgotten, something unexpected happened. Talia laughed at all the right moments. She asked thoughtful questions. She looked at Jared with such convincing affection that he almost believed it himself, and when William's energy began to fade, she gently adjusted his pillows and poured him water with the practiced care of someone who had looked after loved ones all her life. "She's a keeper," William whispered to Jared when Talia stepped out to speak with a nurse. "I know," Jared replied, surprised to find he meant it, at least for now. When visiting hours ended, Jared walked Talia to her car, an old Honda with fading paint. "You were amazing in there," he said. "He completely believes you." "That's because I wasn't entirely acting," Talia admitted, unlocking her door. "Your father is a sweet man." "Sweet? William Caldwell?" Jared chuckled. "That's not a word anyone has ever used to describe him." "People change when they're facing the end," Talia said softly. "Sometimes they become who they always wanted to be." The observation hit Jared like a physical blow. "I'll pick you up tomorrow at 9. Dad wants us to have breakfast with him. I'll be ready." Talia slid into her car, then looked up at him. "One day wasn't so bad, was it?" "No," Jared agreed. "It wasn't." As he watched her drive away, Jared felt something shift inside him, a crack in the carefully constructed wall he'd built around his heart. This arrangement was supposed to be simple, a business transaction. So why did it suddenly feel like so much more? The morning sun streamed through the windows of William Caldwell's hospital room as Jared and Talia arrived with breakfast. It had been 3 days since their arrangement began, and already it felt like a routine. "Good morning, you two lovebirds," William called out, his voice stronger than it had been yesterday. The sight of his son and daughter-in-law seemed to breathe new life into him. "We brought your favorite," Talia said, placing a paper bag on the tray table. "Peach cobbler from that little bakery on River Street." William's eyes lit up. "How did you know?" "Jared told me," she answered smoothly, giving her pretend husband a warm smile. In truth, Jared had told her no such thing. Talia had called his Aunt Margaret herself, wanting to bring something special. These little touches were what made their performance so convincing. "The doctors say I might be able to go home next week," William announced, "just for a little while with proper care." Jared nearly choked on his coffee. "Home? I thought that I was on my deathbed." William chuckled. "I still am, son, but I might have a few more weeks than they first thought." Talia squeezed Jared's hand in warning. "That's wonderful news," she said. "We'll make sure everything's ready at the house." Later, in the hospital corridor, Jared paced back and forth. "This isn't what we agreed to. A few days in the hospital, that's it." "What did you expect?" Talia asked, her voice low. "That your father would die on schedule?" Jared stopped pacing, shame washing over him. "I didn't mean it like that." "Yes, you did." Talia crossed her arms. "Look, I can still do this. I'll take a leave of absence from work. We'll say it's to care for my father-in-law. And where will you stay? The Caldwell mansion has a dozen staff who've known me my whole life." "We'll figure it out," Talia said firmly. "Unless you want to tell your father the truth now." The thought of confessing made Jared's stomach turn. William was so happy, so at peace. "No, we keep going." That afternoon, Aunt Margaret visited the hospital, bringing photo albums and flowers. She eyed Talia with unconcealed suspicion. "So," Margaret said, her southern drawl thick with disbelief, "you're the woman who finally caught our Jared." "I suppose I am," Talia replied with a polite smile. "And how exactly did you two meet again?" Before Talia could answer, Jared stepped in. "I told you, Aunt Maggie, at the hospital fundraiser last year." "Funny, I don't recall seeing you at any fundraiser." "You left early," Jared lied smoothly. "Remember, you had that migraine." Margaret's eyes narrowed. "Must have slipped my mind." When she excused herself to speak with the doctor, William turned to them with a conspiratorial smile. "Don't mind her. She's just upset she wasn't invited to the wedding. We wanted to keep it intimate, Talia explained, the lie coming easier each time. I understand. William's expression grew serious. I just wish I could have been there. Guilt twisted in Jared's chest. We should have told you. Water under the bridge. William waved a hand. What matters is that you're happy. Are you happy, son? The question caught Jared off guard. Was he happy? He couldn't remember the last time anyone had asked. Yes, he said, surprised to find he wasn't entirely lying. I am. That evening, Jared drove Talia home, the now familiar route to her modest apartment on the east side of town. They'd fallen into a comfortable pattern. Breakfast with William, lunch at the hospital cafeteria, afternoons filled with stories and memories. Then Jared would drive Talia home. Your aunt doesn't believe us, Talia said as they pulled up to her building. Margaret doesn't believe in anything she didn't personally arrange, Jared replied. Don't worry about her. I'm not worried. I'm just saying we need to be more convincing. Jared turned to look at her. In the dim light of the car, Talia's profile was soft, vulnerable. You're already plenty convincing. The way you laugh at his stories, the way you remember every detail he tells you. That's not acting, Talia admitted. Your father is a fascinating man. He wasn't always this nice. People are complicated. Talia reached for the door handle, then paused. My brother's coming home from college this weekend. I usually cook Sunday dinner. Oh, Jared shifted uncomfortably. I guess we can skip visiting that day. Actually, I was thinking you should come. She didn't look at him as she made the suggestion. If people see us apart on weekends, they'll talk. Savannah's a small town. You want me to meet your family? Just my brother and sister. It's nothing fancy. There was something vulnerable in her invitation that made Jared nod. What time? 5 o'clock, and don't bring anything expensive. They'll know something's up. Sunday arrived, and Jared found himself standing outside Talia's door with a grocery store bouquet and a bottle of mid-priced wine. He'd traded his designer clothes for jeans and a simple button-down shirt. Talia opened the door, flour dusting her cheek. You're early. Should I come back? No, it's fine. She stepped aside to let him in. Mike and Lily aren't here yet. The apartment was small but meticulously clean. Family photos lined the walls. Talia with a younger boy and girl, all three with the same warm eyes. There were no parents in the recent pictures, Jared noticed. Can I help with anything? He asked, following her to the kitchen. Talia looked surprised by the offer. You cook? I can chop things without losing a finger. She handed him an onion and a knife. Prove it. By the time Talia's siblings arrived, Jared had chopped vegetables, set the table, and even helped season the chicken. It was more domestic work than he'd done in his entire adult life, and strangely, he didn't hate it. So, you're the famous husband, said Michael, Talia's brother, a tall young man with the same cautious eyes as his sister. That's me. Jared extended his hand. Jared Caldwell. We know who you are, said Lily, the youngest at 17. Your family owns half the coastline. Not quite half, Jared said with an awkward smile. Dinner was a revelation. The Monroe siblings teased each other, argued about movies, and told stories that had them all laughing until they cried. There were no servants, no fancy wines, no business talk, just genuine conversation. Talia said you guys had a small wedding, Lily said as they cleared the plates. Do you have pictures? Jared froze, but Talia didn't miss a beat. We weren't really into the whole photo thing. It was just us and a justice of the peace. That's so not like you, Michael frowned. You've been planning your wedding since you were 10. People change, Talia said, avoiding Jared's curious gaze. Later, as Jared helped with the dishes, another first, Michael cornered him in the kitchen. My sister says you're the real deal, he said, his voice low. But I know Talia. She's never mentioned you before, and suddenly you're married. We wanted to keep it private, Jared said, the familiar lie sticking in his throat. Michael studied him. She works 3 jobs to keep me in college and Lily in that fancy art school. If this is some rich boy game, it's not, Jared interrupted, surprised by his own vehemence. I care about her. The words hung in the air between them, more truthful than Jared had intended. Michael seemed to find what he was looking for in Jared's expression. Good, because she deserves someone who sees how special she is. On the drive back to his hotel, Jared found himself thinking about Talia's apartment, how it felt more like a home than any of his luxury properties ever had. Your family's nice, he said, breaking the comfortable silence. They're all I have, Talia replied simply. What happened to your parents? Talia stared out the window, her reflection ghost-like in the glass. Mom died 3 years ago. Overdose. Dad left when Lily was a baby. I'm sorry. Don't be. We take care of each other. Jared thought about his own family. The distant father, the absent mother, the aunt who measured love in social standing. That's more than most people have. The next day, William was moved to the Caldwell mansion under the care of a home health nurse. The grand house, with its sweeping staircases and antique furniture, felt cold despite the summer heat. You'll stay here, of course, William told them as he was settled into the downstairs bedroom. I want my family close. Jared looked at Talia, panic rising. We wouldn't want to impose... Nonsense, William insisted. This is your home too, Talia. And just like that, their pretend marriage became a 24-hour performance. They were given the master suite, William's old room, with its king-sized bed and adjoining sitting room. I'll sleep on the couch, Jared offered once they were alone. Don't be ridiculous, Talia said, unpacking the overnight bag she'd hastily packed. The bed is big enough for both of us. That night, lying rigidly on his side of the bed, Jared listened to Talia's soft breathing. This wasn't part of their deal. None of this was, and yet he couldn't bring himself to end it. In the days that followed, they fell into a new routine. Breakfast with William in the sunroom, afternoons in the garden, where Talia would read to him while Jared caught up on work emails, evenings playing cards or watching old movies in the library. It was during one of these movie nights that William first mentioned the will. I've been speaking with my lawyer, he said casually, as Humphrey Bogart filled the screen, making some changes. Jared tensed. Oh, what kind of changes? Nothing for you to worry about, William smiled at Talia, just making sure everyone's taken care of. The next morning, Margaret arrived unannounced, finding Jared and Talia having coffee on the veranda. Isn't this cozy? She said, her smile not reaching her eyes. The happy couple playing house. Good morning to you too, Aunt Maggie, Jared said dryly. Margaret ignored him, focusing on Talia. I've been doing some checking, dear. Funny thing, I can't find any record of your marriage license. Talia's cup clattered against its saucer. We got married in Vermont during a ski trip. How romantic! Margaret's voice dripped with sarcasm. And yet, no announcement, no ring until recently. What exactly are you implying? Jared demanded. Only that it's awfully convenient timing. Your father changes his will and suddenly you're a devoted husband and son. That's enough. Jared stood up, anger flaring. I have no right. It's okay. Talia placed a calming hand on his arm. Your aunt is just looking out for your father. Margaret's eyes narrowed at the gentle touch, at the way Jared instinctively leaned into it. Just know that I'm watching you, both of you. After she left, Talia sank back into her chair. She knows. She suspects, Jared corrected. But she doesn't have proof. What if she tells your father? She won't. Not without evidence. She enjoys the drama too much. That evening, William asked to speak with Jared alone. In the dim light of the study, surrounded by leather-bound books and family portraits, he seemed smaller than ever. Son, I know I wasn't always the father you deserved. Dad, you don't have to... Let me finish. William's voice was firm. I was too hard on you. Expected too much. Pushed you away like I pushed your mother away. Jared swallowed the lump in his throat. That was a long time ago. Not long enough to forget. William reached for a small box on the side table. I want you to have this. Inside was a vintage watch, gold and silver, with intricate engravings on the face. Grandpa's watch? He gave it to me the day you were born. William's eyes misted over. Said a man needs to know the value of time once he has a family. Jared slipped the watch onto his wrist, the weight of it unfamiliar, yet somehow right. Thank you. Thank Talia, William said softly. If you hadn't found her, I don't think you would have come home at all. The truth of those words stayed with Jared as he made his way upstairs. He found Talia on the balcony, wrapped in a light sweater against the evening chill. Everything okay? She asked. He gave me my grandfather's watch. Jared held up his wrist. It's been in the family for generations. Talia's eyes widened. Jared, that's significant. I know. He joined her at the railing, their shoulders almost touching. We should end this. What? The lying. It's getting out of hand. The will, the family heirlooms. Jared ran a hand through his hair. It's not right. Talia turned to face him, moonlight casting shadows across her face. You want to tell him the truth? Now it would crush him. Living this lie is crushing me. The admission surprised them both. Why? Talia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Because you have to pretend to care about someone? No, Jared said, suddenly finding it hard to meet her eyes. Because I'm not pretending anymore. The confession hung in the air between them, as real and fragile as a heartbeat. Talia took a step back. Don't say things like that. Why not? It's the truth, the first honest thing in this whole mess. Because when this ends, and it will end, Jared, I'm the one who has to go back to my real life. Her voice cracked slightly. This is all just a fantasy. It doesn't have to be. Talia shook her head, tears gathering in her eyes. You don't belong in my world, and I certainly don't belong in yours. Your aunt made that perfectly clear. I don't care what Margaret thinks, but you should care what I think. Talia moved toward the door. And I think we need to remember what this is. A business arrangement, nothing more. As she walked away, Jared felt something inside him crack open, a dam breaking after years of carefully constructed indifference. He wanted to go after her, to argue, to convince her she was wrong. Instead, he stayed on the balcony, watching the stars and wondering when exactly his pretend wife had become the most real thing in his life. Inside their bedroom, Talia leaned against the closed door, her heart racing. She couldn't fall for Jared Caldwell. She wouldn't. Rich men like him didn't end up with women who cleaned their families' guest houses. That was the stuff of fairy tales, not real life. And yet, as she crawled into bed that night, careful to stay on her side of the invisible line that divided it, she couldn't help but wish that just once the fairy tale could be true. The next morning, tension hung in the air between them, thick and unspoken. They went through the motions of their routine, smiling for William's benefit, touching only when necessary. Are you two fighting? William asked over lunch, his eyes sharp despite his weakened state. No, they answered in unison, too quickly. William chuckled. The first rule of marriage, never go to bed angry. If only it were that simple, Talia thought. That afternoon, as William napped, Jared received a call from New York, business problems that needed his immediate attention. He'd have to fly back just for a day or two. I'll stay with your father, Talia offered, their first real conversation since the balcony. You don't have to. I want to. And she meant it. With Jared gone, the house felt different, quieter, emptier somehow. Talia spent the evenings reading to William, listening to his stories about Jared as a child, how he'd build sandcastles for hours, how he'd cry whenever they had to leave the beach. He was such a sensitive boy, William said fondly. Until I taught him that Caldwell men don't show weakness. That wasn't a very good lesson, Talia said before she could stop herself. To her surprise, William laughed. No, it wasn't. I've had a lot of time to think about my mistakes. On the second night, William asked her to fetch a small box from his dresser drawer. Inside was a letter, sealed and addressed to my son and daughter-in-law. When I'm gone, he said, pressing it into her hands, I want you two to read this together. William, please, Talia, promise me. She nodded, unable to refuse this dying man anything. I promise. Later that night, alone in the big bed that somehow felt colder without Jared beside her, Talia stared at the ceiling and wondered how something that had started as a lie could hurt so much when it ended, because it would end. It had to. Fantasy or not, their time was running out, just like William's. The thought brought fresh tears to her eyes, and this time she let them fall. 3 days after Jared left for New York, Talia stood at the window watching for his car. William had asked about him every hour, and each time, her reassurances felt thinner. He'll be back soon, she'd promised that morning. Business meetings always run long, but the truth was she hadn't heard from Jared since a brief text yesterday. Delayed. Sorry. Was he having second thoughts? Had their conversation on the balcony scared him away? As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the manicured lawn, headlights finally appeared on the driveway. Talia's heart leapt, then immediately steadied itself. This was just relief that their charade could continue, nothing more. Jared looked exhausted as he walked through the door, his suit wrinkled and his eyes shadowed by lack of sleep. You're back, Talia said, suddenly unsure how to act without an audience. Barely made my flight. He set down his bag, his gaze lingering on her face. How's Dad? Asking for you. His fever came back last night. Worry creased Jared's brow. Why didn't you call me? I tried. Your phone went straight to voicemail. The meetings ran all night. I forgot to charge it. He rubbed his eyes. I should have been here. You're here now, Talia said softly. That's what matters. Something shifted in Jared's expression. A softening, a surrender. Before either could speak again, William's nurse appeared in the doorway. Mr. Caldwell is asking for both of you, she announced. William was propped up in bed, looking paler than when Jared had left. His face brightened at the sight of his son. There you are, he said, extending a thin hand. "Thought you might have run off for good this time." "Not a chance," Jared replied, squeezing his father's hand. "Just boring business stuff." "Well, you're just in time. I have a surprise." William nodded toward his bedside table. In the drawer, Talia reached for it, pulling out a large envelope. Inside were old photographs, faded and yellowed with age. "The family beach house," William explained as they examined the pictures, "before we tore it down to build the resort." The photos showed a modest cottage with peeling white paint and blue shutters. A much younger William stood proudly on the porch, his arm around a beautiful woman with Jared's eyes. "Mom," Jared whispered, touching the image gently. "Our happiest times were there," William said, his voice wistful. "Before the money, before the empire, just the three of us and the ocean." Talia watched Jared's face as he flipped through the photos, glimpses of a childhood she suspected he'd forgotten. A little boy building sandcastles, the same boy, older now, fishing off a wooden dock. A teenage Jared, sullen and distant, standing apart from his father. "I've been thinking," William continued, "that land on the north end of the property, the part we never developed, I want you two to build something there, a home, not a hotel." Jared looked up, startled. "Dad, let me finish." William's voice grew stronger with purpose. "I've already spoken to my lawyer. That parcel will be yours, Jared, separate from the business, a place for you and Talia to start your family." The weight of his words, the gift, the expectation, the future he imagined for them, settled heavily in the room. "It's too much," Talia said, genuinely overwhelmed. "Nonsense." William smiled at her. "You've made my son happier than I've ever seen him. Consider it a proper wedding present." That night, as they prepared for bed in awkward silence, the magnitude of their deception hung between them like a physical presence. "We have to tell him," Jared said finally, sitting on the edge of the bed. "This has gone too far." Talia emerged from the bathroom in her nightgown, her face freshly washed and vulnerable without makeup. "And break his heart when he's giving you a piece of your childhood? That's exactly why we need to stop. He's rewriting his will, Talia, making plans for our future." Jared ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "A future that doesn't exist." "Doesn't it?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. Jared looked up, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "What are you saying?" Before she could answer, a sharp knock interrupted them. Margaret stood in the doorway, her expression triumphant. "Well, well," she said, eyes darting between them. "Trouble in paradise? What do you want, Aunt Maggie?" Jared's voice was cold. Margaret stepped into the room uninvited, closing the door behind her. "I want the truth, and I think I have it." She pulled a folder from her purse and slapped it on the bed. "There is no marriage license, not in Vermont, not anywhere." Talia felt the blood drain from her face. "You had no right. I have every right to protect this family from gold diggers and con artists." Margaret's gaze was withering. "You're not a Caldwell. You never will be." "That's enough," Jared stood, placing himself between the women. "Get out. Not until you admit what you've done." Margaret turned to Talia. "How much is he paying you? Or was this your idea all along?" "Stop it." Jared's voice rose dangerously. "William deserves to know he's being lied to," Margaret continued. "By tomorrow morning, I'll make sure—" "You'll do nothing," Jared cut her off, his voice dropping to a deadly calm. "Because if you breathe a word of this to my father, I'll make sure you never see another penny from this family." Margaret paled. "You wouldn't dare. Try me." Jared stepped closer. "I'm still a Caldwell, Aunt Maggie, and Dad made me executor of his estate years ago." A tense silence filled the room as Margaret weighed her options. Finally, she snatched back her folder. "This isn't over," she hissed before storming out. As the door slammed behind her, Talia sank onto the bed, trembling. She's going to tell him. No, she won't. Jared sat beside her, close but not touching. "Margaret loves money more than truth. It doesn't matter. We're running out of time anyway." Talia looked down at her hands, at the ring that wasn't really hers. "The doctor called while you were gone. Your father's kidneys are failing." Jared's face crumpled, the defiance of moments ago replaced by raw grief. Without thinking, Talia reached for him, pulling him into her arms as his shoulders began to shake. "I'm sorry," she whispered against his hair. "I'm so sorry." They stayed like that for a long time, comfort becoming something more as Jared's arms wrapped around her waist, his face buried in the curve of her neck. When he finally pulled back, his eyes were red but dry. "Thank you," he said softly. "For everything." Talia nodded, not trusting her voice. They got into bed, the space between them narrower than it had been before. In the darkness, Jared spoke again. "You never answered my question about our future." Talia stared at the ceiling, her heart pounding. "I don't know what's real anymore, Jared. This all started as a lie. Not all of it." His hand found hers under the covers, fingers intertwining. "Not this." She wanted to believe him. God, how she wanted to. But Talia had learned long ago that wanting something didn't make it true. "Get some sleep," she said, squeezing his hand once before letting go. "Tomorrow will be hard enough." The next day brought a parade of doctors and specialists, all with the same grim expressions. William's condition was deteriorating rapidly. It might be days, not weeks. Family members began to arrive. Distant cousins Jared barely remembered. Business associates who spoke of William in reverent tones. Through it all, Talia stayed by Jared's side, the perfect supportive wife. "You don't have to do this," he told her as they grabbed a moment alone in the kitchen. "These people aren't your problem." "I'm not doing it for them," Talia replied, handing him a fresh cup of coffee. "I'm doing it for you." Margaret watched them from across the room, her eyes calculating. She hadn't mentioned their confrontation, but her silence felt dangerous. A storm gathering on the horizon. That evening, as the house finally emptied of visitors, William asked to speak with Talia alone. Jared waited anxiously outside the bedroom door, unable to hear their hushed conversation. When Talia emerged 20 minutes later, her eyes were red from crying. "What happened?" Jared asked, alarmed. "What did he say?" Talia shook her head, unable to speak. She pressed something into his hand, a small velvet box, then hurried down the hall to compose herself. Inside the box was a delicate gold locket on a thin chain. When Jared opened it, he found a tiny photograph of his mother on one side. The other side was empty. A note in his father's shaky handwriting read, "For the woman who brought my son home. Fill the other side with a picture of your first child." Jared closed the box, emotion tightening his throat. How could they continue this deception? And yet, how could they not? That night, Talia was unusually quiet as they prepared for bed. She sat at the vanity, brushing her hair with slow, methodical strokes. "He gave you my mother's locket," Jared said, watching her reflection in the mirror. Talia set down the brush. "I can't accept it." "You have to. He'd be heartbroken otherwise. Don't you understand?" She turned to face him, eyes bright with unshed tears. "These gifts, these promises, they're not for me. They're for your real wife, the woman you're supposed to love. What if that is you?" Jared moved to kneel beside her chair. "What if all of this happened for a reason?" Talia shook her head. "That's not how real life works. In real life, men like you don't end up with women like me." "Why not?" "Because when this is over, when your father is gone, you'll go back to New York and your glamorous life, and I'll still be here, working night shifts and taking care of my family. It doesn't have to be that way." Jared took her hands in his. "Come with me." "To New York?" Talia laughed, but there was no humor in it. "And do what? Be your trophy wife? The poor girl you rescued?" "Be my wife," Jared said simply. "For real this time." The words hung in the air between them, impossibly heavy with meaning. Talia stared at him, searching his face for any sign of insincerity. "You don't mean that." "I do." Jared's grip tightened on her hands. "I know it sounds crazy. We barely know each other. But these past 2 weeks with you have been more real than the last 10 years of my life." "Jared," Talia's voice broke on his name. "Just think about it." He pressed the velvet box into her hands. "Please." Before she could answer, a commotion in the hallway startled them. William's night nurse was calling for help, her voice urgent. They rushed to William's room to find him struggling to breathe, his face ashen. The next hours passed in a blur of paramedics, hospital corridors and hushed consultations with doctors. By dawn, William was stabilized but unconscious, machines breathing for him in the ICU. Jared sat beside the bed, holding his father's limp hand while Talia brought him coffee and updates from the medical team. "You should get some rest," she told him, as morning light filtered through the hospital blinds. "I'll stay with him." "I can't leave," Jared said, his voice hoarse from exhaustion. "Just for an hour. A shower, a change of clothes." Talia placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "I promise I'll call if anything changes." Finally, he agreed. As he stood to leave, he pulled her into a tight embrace, breathing in the clean scent of her hair. "Thank you," he whispered, "for being here, for being you." Talia watched him go, her heart so full it hurt. Then she took his place at William's bedside, taking the old man's hand in hers. "I'm here, William," she said softly. "Jared will be back soon." To her surprise, William's eyes fluttered open. focusing on her with unexpected clarity. "Talia," he rasped, his voice barely audible over the machines. "Don't try to talk." She reached for the call button. "I'll get the doctor." William's hand tightened weakly around hers. "No, listen." Talia leaned closer to hear his labored words. "Make him happy," William whispered. "He needs you." "William, I know." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I've always known." Talia's breath caught. "Known what?" "That it wasn't real. At first." William's eyes held hers. "But it is now. I can see it." Tears spilled down Talia's cheeks. "I'm so sorry." "Don't be." William's gaze drifted to the ceiling. "You gave an old man hope. For my son. For the future. I care about him," Talia admitted, the truth finally spilling out. "So much. Then tell him." William's eyes began to close, his energy fading. Life is too short for lies. When Jared returned an hour later, freshly showered and changed, William had slipped back into unconsciousness. The doctors were not optimistic. "What did they say?" Jared asked, noticing Talia's red-rimmed eyes. "It's just a matter of time now," she said gently. "Hours, maybe." Jared nodded, his face a mask of control that didn't quite hide his pain. "Did he wake up at all?" Talia hesitated, William's confession heavy on her heart. "Briefly. He wasn't making much sense. It wasn't entirely a lie. How could she tell Jared that his father had known all along, that their elaborate deception had been transparent to a dying man? Family arrived throughout the day, the same cousins, the same business associates, and Margaret, who watched Talia with narrowed eyes but kept her distance. As evening fell, the hospital room emptied until only Jared and Talia remained. William's breathing had grown more labored, each rise and fall of his chest a visible struggle. "You should go home," Jared told her. "Get some sleep." "I'm not leaving you," Talia replied firmly. Just after midnight, William Caldwell took his last breath, his hand held between both of theirs. The beeping monitors flatlined into a single continuous tone. Nurses rushed in, but it was too late. He was gone. In the hushed aftermath, Jared stood motionless by the window, staring out at the hospital parking lot, while the staff disconnected tubes and wires from his father's body. Talia gave him space, handling the immediate arrangements with quiet efficiency. It wasn't until they were in the car, driving back to the mansion in the pre-dawn darkness, that Jared finally broke. A single sob escaped him, then another, until he had to pull over, unable to see through his tears. Talia guided him into the passenger seat and took the wheel, one hand on the steering wheel, the other holding his as he wept for his father, for lost time, for all the words left unsaid. Back at the house, she led him upstairs, helped him out of his jacket and sat with him on the edge of the bed as his grief poured out in messy, broken sentences. "I wasted so much time," he said, voice raw, "so many years being angry." "He knew you loved him," Talia assured him, stroking his hair. "He always knew." Jared looked up at her, his face vulnerable in a way she'd never seen before. "Stay with me tonight, please. Not on your side of the bed. Just stay." Talia nodded, her own tears falling freely now. They lay down together, fully clothed, Jared's head on her shoulder, her arms around him as he drifted into an exhausted sleep. In those quiet hours before dawn, watching Jared's face finally peaceful in sleep, Talia made her decision. She would tell him the truth, that his father had known about their deception, that her feelings were real, that she wanted to try for something genuine between them. But fate had other plans. Morning brought chaos to the Caldwell mansion. Relatives arrived early to pay respects. The family lawyer appeared with preliminary details about the will. Funeral arrangements needed to be made. Through it all, Jared moved like a man underwater, speaking when necessary but otherwise withdrawn. Talia stayed close, fielding calls and visitors, organizing meals, being the strength he needed. Their conversation would have to wait. That afternoon, as Talia was arranging flowers in the foyer, Margaret cornered her, a triumphant gleam in her eyes. "It's over now," she said in a low voice. "The charade can end." "This isn't the time," Talia replied evenly. "On the contrary, with William gone, there's no reason to pretend anymore." Margaret smiled coldly. "Unless you think Jared will actually keep you around." Before Talia could respond, the family lawyer approached them, his expression grave. "Ms. Munro, we need to discuss some irregularities with the will." Margaret's smile widened. "Irregularities? It seems Mr. Caldwell made some unusual provisions." The lawyer glanced between them. "Perhaps we should speak privately. Whatever you have to say, you can say it here," Margaret insisted. The lawyer sighed. "Very well. It appears William left specific instructions regarding Ms. Monroe and Jared's marriage. Talia's heart sank. What kind of instructions? A substantial portion of the estate, including the North property and a trust fund, is contingent upon your marriage remaining intact for at least 1 year after his death. Margaret's face contorted with anger. That's preposterous. They're not even legally married. The lawyer looked startled. I beg your pardon? It's a sham, a lie they concocted to please a dying man. Talia felt the room spinning around her. This couldn't be happening. Not now. Not like this. From the doorway came a sharp intake of breath. Talia turned to see Jared standing there, his face ashen. Jared, she began, stepping toward him. He held up a hand, stopping her. Is it true? He asked the lawyer. About the will? The lawyer nodded uncomfortably. Yes, your father was quite insistent. Jared's eyes found Talia's, a storm of emotions swirling in their depths. And the rest? What my aunt said? The silence that stretched between them was answer enough. I can explain, Talia said, her voice barely above a whisper. But Jared was already turning away, his shoulders rigid with betrayal. Everyone out, he ordered. Now. As the room quickly emptied, Margaret lingered just long enough to shoot Talia a victorious smirk. I told you it wasn't over. When they were alone, Jared poured himself a drink with shaking hands. How long have you known? About the will? I didn't know anything about it, Talia insisted. I swear. But you knew my father had figured us out. Talia hesitated, then nodded. He told me yesterday at the hospital, when you went home to change. Jared knocked back his drink in one swallow. And you didn't think to mention that? He had just died, Jared. I didn't think it was the right moment to... To what? Admit our whole relationship was a fraud? His laugh was bitter. God, I'm such an idiot. It wasn't a fraud. Not all of it. Talia took a tentative step toward him. What I feel for you is real. Is it? Or is it the money? Jared's eyes were hard now. The trust fund must sound pretty good to someone working night shifts to pay her brother's tuition. The accusation stung like a physical blow. That's not fair. No? Then tell me why you kept playing along after my father knew the truth. Why you're still wearing that ring right now. Talia looked down at her hand, at the diamond that had come to feel like it belonged there. Because I love you, she whispered. For a moment something flickered in Jared's eyes. Hope, perhaps, or longing, but it was quickly extinguished by hurt and suspicion. Convenient timing, he said coldly. Now that there's a fortune at stake. Talia removed the ring slowly, placing it on the table between them. I don't want your money, Jared. I never did. Then what do you want? I wanted you. Her voice broke on the words. Just you. But Jared had retreated behind the wall she'd watched him lower over the past 2 weeks, the arrogant, untouchable heir who didn't need anyone. I think you should go, he said quietly. We're done here. Talia stood frozen, unable to believe this was happening. After everything they'd shared, after last night when he'd wept in her arms. Jared, please. I said go. His voice rose sharply, then dropped again. Before I call security. With dignity she didn't feel, Talia gathered her purse and keys. At the door she turned back one last time. Your father wanted you to be happy, she said softly. That's all he ever wanted. Then she was gone, walking out of the Caldwell mansion with nothing but the clothes on her back and a heart that felt like it had been shattered into a million pieces. As her old Honda sputtered to life, Talia allowed herself one moment of weakness, a single, gut-wrenching sob that tore from her throat. Then she straightened her shoulders, wiped her eyes and drove away from the life that had never really been hers. Inside the mansion, Jared watched her car disappear down the driveway, a tumbler of scotch clutched in his white-knuckled grip. Part of him wanted to run after her, to apologize, to beg her to stay, but the familiar demons of doubt and distrust whispered in his ear. She'd lied about his father knowing. What else had she lied about? Her feelings, her motives. The truth was, Jared Caldwell didn't know how to trust anymore, not even himself. He raised his glass in a bitter toast to the empty room. Congratulations, Dad, he murmured. You got what you wanted. I came home. But as night fell over the Caldwell estate, the victory felt hollow indeed. 2 weeks after William Caldwell's funeral, Talia Monroe returned to her night shifts at the hospital. The familiar routine of checking vitals and dispensing medications offered little comfort, but at least it kept her busy, kept her from thinking about Jared. You look terrible, her supervisor commented one night. Still not sleeping? Talia forced a smile. I'm fine. But she wasn't fine. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Jared's face, first soft with vulnerability as he wept in her arms, then hard with betrayal as he ordered her to leave. At home, Lily and Michael watched her with worried eyes. They knew something had happened, but Talia couldn't bring herself to explain. How could she tell them that she'd fallen in love with a lie that had somehow become real, only to lose it all in an instant? Across town, in the empty vastness of the Caldwell mansion, Jared was hardly faring better. He'd thrown himself into handling his father's estate, attending meetings with lawyers and accountants from dawn until dusk. At night, he drank expensive scotch until he could fall into a dreamless sleep. Margaret hovered nearby, smugly satisfied with how things had turned out. "It's for the best," she assured him over breakfast. "That girl was never right for you." Jared said nothing, staring into his coffee cup as if it might contain answers to questions he couldn't even formulate. The will remained in limbo. Without a legal marriage to Talia, the special provisions couldn't be enacted. The family lawyer suggested contesting William's mental competence at the time of the changes, but Jared had refused immediately. Whatever else had happened, he wouldn't dishonor his father's memory that way. On a rainy Tuesday morning, Jared found himself in his father's study, sorting through personal papers. The room still smelled like William's aftershave, a scent that transported Jared back to childhood mornings when his father would lift him onto his lap and let him help with important business. Inside the desk drawer, buried beneath old passports and stock certificates, Jared found a small leather journal, his father's diary, the pages filled with William's bold handwriting. Curious, he began to read. Most entries were brief, notes about business deals, doctor's appointments, the occasional observation about the weather. But toward the end, the entries grew longer, more reflective. Jared's breath caught as he read an entry from just after his first visit to the hospital. "Jared came today. He looks tired, successful but tired. When he told me he was married, I almost laughed out loud. My son, the worst liar in Georgia. But I saw something in his eyes when he talked about bringing her tomorrow. Panic, yes, but something else too. Hope, maybe. So I'll play along. Let's see what kind of woman he finds to pretend to be his wife." Jared turned the page with trembling hands. Met Talia today. Remembered her right away. Eva Monroe's quiet daughter. Always reading under that oak tree. She's grown into quite a woman. Strong, but gentle. The way she looks at Jared when she thinks no one is watching. That can't be faked. Not entirely. And the way my son keeps finding excuses to touch her hand, her shoulder. He might have started this as a lie, but there's truth growing in it. I can see it. For the first time in years, I have hope for him. Page after page revealed William's observations of their developing relationship, his quiet orchestration of moments designed to push them together, the invitation to stay at the house, the family heirlooms, the stories of Jared's childhood. They think I'm asleep, but I hear them talking on the balcony, arguing about ending the charade. Good. Let them struggle with it. Real love isn't easy. God knows Eleanor and I learned that the hard way, but it's worth fighting for. The final entry, dated the day before William's last hospital admission, made Jared's eyes burn with unshed tears. Margaret suspects. Always too clever for her own good, that woman. Never understood that money isn't what makes a life worth living. People do. Love does. I've made arrangements with Phillips about the will, a little insurance policy to give them time to figure things out. Jared will be angry at first. He hates being manipulated almost as much as I always did, but he'll understand someday, when he has children of his own, when he realizes that a parent's greatest wish is simply to see their child happy. The diary slipped from Jared's fingers, landing on the carpet with a soft thud. His father had known all along, had seen through their deception from the very first day, and instead of being angry, he had used his final days to push them together, recognizing something real growing between them before they did. All this time, Jared whispered to the empty room. He was the one pretending. A knock at the study door startled him. The housekeeper entered carrying a small package. "This came for you, Mr. Caldwell. Special delivery." Alone again, Jared examined the package, a padded envelope with no return address. Inside was a velvet jewelry box and a handwritten note he recognized immediately as Talia's neat script. "This belongs with your family, not with me. Thank you for letting me borrow it even for a little while. T." Inside the box was his mother's gold locket, the one his father had given Talia. Something else was in the envelope too, the sealed letter addressed to my son and daughter-in-law that William had entrusted to them. Jared stared at it, remembering his father's instruction that they read it together after he was gone. Another manipulation from beyond the grave, or a final gift? His phone was in his hand before he could second-guess himself, fingers hovering over Talia's number. But what would he say? How could he explain the tangle of anger, betrayal, and longing that had consumed him these past weeks? In the end, he simply texted, "We need to talk, please." Across town, Talia's phone buzzed on her nightstand. She just finished a 12-hour shift and was too exhausted to check it before collapsing into bed. It wasn't until evening that she saw Jared's message. Her heart stuttered at the sight of his name on her screen, but caution tempered her reaction. What could he possibly want to say to her now? After staring at the message for 20 minutes, she finally replied, "About what?" His response came immediately. "About my father's letter, the one we promised to read together." Talia closed her eyes. The letter. In the chaos of their parting, she'd completely forgotten about it. "When?" she typed. "Tonight. I could come to you." The thought of Jared in her small apartment made her stomach twist with anxiety. No. Neutral ground. "The coffee shop on Abercorn, 8 p.m. I'll be there." The coffee shop was nearly empty when Talia arrived, exactly 10 minutes late to ensure Jared would be there first. He sat at a corner table, 2 cups already waiting. He looked thinner than she remembered, with shadows under his eyes that matched her own. "You came," he said, as she slid into the chair across from him. "You said it was about your father's letter." Talia kept her voice neutral, fighting to control the emotions that threatened to overwhelm her. "Do you have it?" Jared nodded, pulling the sealed envelope from his jacket pocket. "You sent back the locket. It wasn't mine to keep. He wanted you to have it." "Your father wanted a lot of things." Talia reached for her coffee, needing something to do with her hands, most of which weren't possible. Silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken words and painful memories. "I found his diary," Jared said finally. "He knew Talia from the very beginning. I told you that. You told me he figured it out at the end." Jared's eyes held hers. "But he knew the first day. When I told him I was married, he saw right through me." Talia's cup froze halfway to her lips. "What?" "It was all in his journal. How he decided to play along. How he—" Jared swallowed hard. "How he saw something real growing between us before we did. Is that why you wanted to see me? To tell me your father was manipulating us all along?" "No." Jared pushed the letter across the table. "I wanted to keep my promise to him, to read this with you." Talia stared at the envelope, her resolve wavering. "And then what?" "Then nothing. You go your way, I go mine." His voice was steady, but his eyes told a different story. Unless what?" Jared ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made Talia's heart ache. "Just read the letter with me, please." With trembling fingers, Talia picked up the envelope and broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper covered in William's elegant handwriting. She unfolded it and began to read aloud. "My dear Jared and Talia, if you're reading this, then I've left this world for whatever comes next. Don't waste time being sad for me. I've had a good life, even with its regrets. By now, you've probably figured out that I knew about your arrangement from the start. Don't be embarrassed. In your place, I might have done the same thing. We Caldwell men have never been good at disappointing the people we love. What you may not realize is how much joy your little charade brought me in my final days. Not because I was fooled, but because I watched something remarkable happen. I watched a lie transform into truth right before my eyes. Jared, my son, I've never seen you look at anyone the way you look at Talia when you think no one is watching. Like she's a puzzle you can't quite solve but desperately want to. Like she matters in a way nothing else ever has. And Talia, my dear girl, you try so hard to guard your heart. But it shines through anyway. In your kindness, your strength, the way you stand your ground when everyone else would bend. You remind me so much of Eleanor it takes my breath away. I don't know what will happen between you two after I'm gone. Life has a way of complicating even the simplest feelings. But I want you to know this. What started as pretend became more real than anything in that big empty house. So here's my final request. Be honest with each other. Not just about your feelings, but about your fears. Jared, you're terrified of being left like your mother left us. Talia, you're afraid of being used and discarded like your mother was. These fears make sense, but don't let them steal your chance at happiness. Love isn't always convenient or practical. Sometimes it arrives in the strangest packages, like a fake marriage to please a dying old man. But when it's real, nothing else matters. All my love, William, Dad, P.S. Jared. If you let this amazing woman go because of your pride or fear, I will find a way to haunt you for the rest of your days. Don't test me on this. The coffee shop blurred around them as Talia finished reading, tears streaming down her face. Across the table, Jared wasn't faring much better. his eyes red-rimmed and bright. "He knew us better than we knew ourselves," Jared said softly. Talia carefully folded the letter, trying to compose herself. "He was a remarkable man." "Talia, look at me." Jared's voice was gentle but insistent. "Please." She raised her eyes to his, vulnerable and unguarded for the first time since their parting. "I'm sorry," he said, the words rushing out as if he'd been holding them back for weeks, "for what I said at the house, for accusing you of being after the money, for not trusting you. You were grieving," Talia said, though the memory still stung. "That's no excuse." Jared reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of hers. "The truth is, I was scared. When Margaret exposed us, all I could think was that everything between us had been a lie, that what I felt, what I thought you felt, wasn't real. It was real for me," Talia whispered. "It still is." Hope flickered in Jared's eyes. "Even after everything, even after everything." She took a deep breath. "But it doesn't change anything. We're from different worlds, Jared. Your family, your friends, your life in New York. Where do I fit in all that?" "Wherever you want to." He finally took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "I don't care about New York or the resort business or any of it. These past 2 weeks without you, I've been miserable, empty." "So have I," Talia admitted. "Then why are we doing this to ourselves?" Jared's grip tightened. "I love you, Talia. I think I started falling for you that first day in the hospital, when you held my father's hand and made him smile like no one had in years." The words she'd longed to hear now hung in the air between them, beautiful and terrifying. "What about the will?" she asked. "Practical even now. The conditions your father set." "I don't care about the will. We can contest it, ignore it, whatever you want." Jared leaned closer. "This isn't about money or property or what my father wanted. This is about us. What we want. And what do you want?" "You," he said simply. "Just you." Outside, rain began to fall, pattering against the coffee shop windows, like a gentle reminder that the world continued beyond this moment of truth between them. "We barely know each other," Talia said, one last defense against the hope blooming in her chest. "We have time to learn." Jared smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. "I'm not saying we have to get married tomorrow, for real, I mean. Just give us a chance, a real one this time." Talia looked down at their intertwined hands, at the absence of rings or pretense, just skin against skin, honest and vulnerable. "Okay," she said finally. "Okay." Jared's smile widened. "Just like that? Just like that." Talia found herself smiling too, the weight of weeks lifting from her shoulders. "But we take it slow, one day at a time. Whatever you want." Jared brought her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "We'll write our own story this time. No lies, no pretending." As they left the coffee shop together, walking hand in hand through the gentle rain, Talia felt something unfamiliar settle in her chest. A quiet certainty, a peace she hadn't known was possible. 3 weeks later, they stood together on the undeveloped north end of the Caldwell property, looking out over the ocean. The land William had wanted them to build on stretched before them, wild and beautiful in the late afternoon sunlight. "What do you think?" Jared asked, his arm around her waist. "Too isolated?" Talia leaned into him, breathing in the salt air. "It's perfect." They'd been taking things slowly, as promised. Dinner dates, long walks, getting to know each other without the pressure of deception or deathbed promises. Jared had started house hunting in Savannah, talking about expanding the resort's charitable foundation instead of its profit margins. The changes in him weren't dramatic, but they were real, a softening of sharp edges, a willingness to imagine a future different from the one he'd been racing toward all his life. For her part, Talia had accepted Jared's offer to pay off Michael's student loans, not as charity, but as an investment in family. She'd reduced her hospital hours to pursue a graduate degree in nursing administration, a dream she'd put aside for too long. "My father was right about this place," Jared said, watching the waves crash against the shore. "It does feel like coming home." Talia smiled up at him. "Your father was right about a lot of things, including us." Jared turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Which is why I have something to ask you." Talia's heart skipped a beat as he reached into his pocket. "It's not what you think," he said quickly, noting her expression. "Well, not exactly." What he pulled out wasn't a ring box, but a small envelope. Inside was a key. "What's this?" she asked. "A key to my place." Jared looked suddenly nervous. "I'm not asking you to move in, just to have it. To come and go as you please, to leave a toothbrush or a book or whatever you want." The simplicity of the gesture, so different from grand gestures or elaborate proposals, touched Talia deeply. "I have something for you too," she said, reaching into her purse. She handed him a small photograph, one taken at Sunday dinner with her siblings last week. In it, Jared sat between Michael and Lily, all three laughing at some forgotten joke while Talia looked on from behind the camera. "For the locket," she explained. "I thought maybe, someday, we could fill the other side together." Understanding dawned in Jared's eyes. He pulled her close, pressing his forehead to hers. "I'd like that, very much." As the sun began to set, casting long golden shadows across the beach, Jared kissed her, not for show, not for anyone else, but just for them. A promise without words, a future writing itself one day at a time. 6 months later, Talia stood in her apartment, staring at a small package that had arrived in the morning mail. The return address was unfamiliar, but the elegant handwriting reminded her of William's. Inside was a note from his lawyer, explaining that William had arranged for this delivery on the 6-month anniversary of his death. Beneath the note was another sealed envelope addressed to Talia alone. With trembling fingers, she opened it, finding a short letter written in William's distinctive hand. "Dear Talia, if you're reading this, then 6 months have passed since I left. I hope they've been good months. I hope you and Jared have found your way to each other, not because of my meddling, but because what I saw between you was real. I knew from the moment you walked into my hospital room that you were exactly what my son needed, not because you were perfect, but because you were strong enough to see past his walls to the good man underneath. I've enclosed something that belongs to you, a reminder that sometimes the most beautiful truths begin as necessary lies. With love and gratitude, William." At the bottom of the package was a small velvet box. Inside, nestled on white satin, was the simple diamond ring Jared had bought for their charade, the one she'd left behind on the table the day she walked out. Talia stared at it, memories flooding back. Their first awkward meeting at the hospital, breakfast with William, Sunday dinner with her siblings, nights talking on the balcony, the feeling of Jared's hand in hers as they read William's final letter together. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. She knew who it was before she opened it. Jared, early for their dinner date as usual, probably with flowers, despite her insistence that he didn't need to bring something every time. Sure enough, he stood in the hallway holding a bouquet of daisies, her favorites. But something was different about him tonight, a nervous energy, a heightened intensity in his gaze. "Hi," she said, stepping back to let him in. Instead of entering, Jared remained in the doorway, his expression suddenly serious. "Before I come in, I need to say something." "Okay." Talia felt a flicker of anxiety. "Is everything all right?" "Everything is perfect. That's why I'm here." He took a deep breath. 6 months ago, we promised to take things slow, to learn about each other, to build something real." Talia nodded, unsure where this was going. "And in that time, I've learned that you snore when you're really tired, that you cry at commercials with puppies, that you're the strongest person I've ever met." Jared's voice grew softer. "I've learned that I want to wake up next to you every morning for the rest of my life." As he spoke, he slowly lowered himself to one knee, pulling a small box from his pocket. "Jared," Talia whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. "Talia Monroe," he said, opening the box to reveal a ring that was nothing like the first one. This was vintage, with delicate filigree work around a modest diamond. "Will you marry me? For real this time?" Tears blurred Talia's vision as she looked down at the man before her, no longer the arrogant heir she'd first met, but her partner, her best friend, the love she never expected to find. With shaking hands, she reached into her pocket and pulled out the ring William had returned to her. Jared's eyes widened in recognition. "Where did you get that?" "Your father," she explained through her tears. "He arranged to have it sent to me today, with a letter." "Always meddling," Jared said with a soft laugh. "Even now." Talia held out the first ring, the one that had symbolized their lie. "This is where we started." Then she looked at the new ring in Jared's hand, the promise of their future. "And that's where we're going." "Is that a yes?" Jared asked, hope brightening his face. Instead of answering, Talia closed the letter from William and said, her voice trembling but sure, "If this is another lie, please don't say anything at all." Jared rose to his feet, taking her face in his hands with infinite tenderness. "No more lies," he whispered. "Just love, for the rest of our lives." As his lips met hers, sealing a promise that had begun as pretense and blossomed into truth, Talia knew that some lies, the ones born of kindness, of hope, of possibility, could sometimes lead to the most beautiful truths of all. And somewhere, she was certain, William Caldwell was smiling.